Hey everybody, I'm Melissa Miller, a hacker, a security researcher, cybersecurity professional. I'm the Business Information Security Officer for S&P Global Ratings. And it is absolutely my pleasure to be here with you at RSA today. We're talking about talent and workforce management in the cybersecurity industry and those things that we need to do from an industry perspective in order to make our workforce more sustainable. Over the course of the pandemic, if you live in the UK or you paid attention to some of the headlines that came out of that area, you know that the British government went through this program they called Rethink, Retool, Reboot. And I was kind of brokenhearted when I saw this because the whole idea of this was they were encouraging people who are working in one industry to pursue a career in cybersecurity. And they had different examples, but it was one example that is the reason why it kind of bothered me was they brought up a barista. And they said that this barista, Justin, his next job could be in cybersecurity. He just didn't know it yet. And they did others with ballerinas and some other things, and these did not go over well, which is part of why it concerns me because I have been talking for the last year using this idea of a barista and how a barista can make that transition from their role making coffee into cybersecurity. So I want to reset on this metaphor a little bit, and I want to share with you a story. So I was working in a consultancy, and I was trying to hire cybersecurity professionals. And one of the resumes that came across my desk was for this person who had worked as a barista, but never worked in a technical field. And it was one, when it came to me, the HR person said right away, like, I realized this is probably not one you want. And I said, well, wait, let me take a look. And so I read through it, and you know what? What if I told you that as I considered the skills that a barista has, I could see the way that those skills would translate to a cybersecurity career? What if I told you I hired that person and they were an amazing security consultant? Sure, they needed some technical knowledge, but I could see they had the technical aptitude. Would you believe me if I told you that? Well, as you might have noticed from the title of this session, that's exactly where we're going. How can we leverage the idea of a barista in a coffee shop or other non-traditional roles that people may come from when they join cybersecurity? I'm willing to bet that most of you, maybe at least half, have some pretty interesting stories about how you got into cybersecurity that have nothing to do with technology whatsoever. I'm the co-host of a podcast called The Uncommon Journey, and you know what? That's what we focus on with every guest. We bring in guests who have all sorts of unique stories because we want to highlight all the unique stories of how people ended up in this particular industry. So we're going to use this barista metaphor. We're going to keep coming back to Justin, and we're going to talk about how skills that Justin might have from being a barista would make him a great fit in cybersecurity. Just wait, you're going to see. Now, let's talk about the other headlines. The headlines that are all over the news when you look at cybersecurity. You've seen these, right? 4 million unfilled jobs at the end of 2019. Cybersecurity suffers from this talent shortage. Oh, the great cybersecurity talent shortage continues. All of these alarmist headlines talking about how we just don't have enough people in cybersecurity. We don't have enough people to hire for all the jobs we have. You've heard things like talent gap, skills shortage, all of these different terms to describe the story that there's just not enough people to fill all these jobs. Well, I'm going to tell you that the problem might be just a little bit different. We don't have a talent shortage. We have a talent gap. We in cybersecurity do a terrible job of maintaining a workforce that is sustainable and manageable and can take us into the future. It's not because of a lack of interest. Think about it. How many of those aspiring professionals, people who want to get a job in cybersecurity, do you hear from on a daily basis? but they can't find jobs. We have 4 million open jobs, countless people looking for jobs that can't find them. That doesn't sound to me like a talent shortage. That sounds to me like we're doing something wrong. So last year, I dove in. I'd been hearing these stories, these different narratives about this talent shortage, and just how nobody could find the talent they needed for these roles. And I was hearing those other stories from the aspiring security professionals, people coming out of college who couldn't find jobs. Last year at RSA, I went to a dinner that was hosted for a number of cybersecurity graduates. And they expressed to me the trouble they were having finding jobs in cybersecurity. So I started to do research. I surveyed thousands of aspiring and experienced cybersecurity professionals. I interviewed hundreds of recruiters and hiring managers to find out what they were seeing. I even did research into online job postings to understand what was going on there. And I'm going to share all of this research with you because what I found supports that same conclusion that it's not really a problem of having enough talent. It's how we search for that talent and how we go about maintaining this workforce that is really what's causing our troubles when it comes to hiring for cybersecurity jobs. Now, there's a lot of stories to tell, and I would love to share with you the countless reams of data that I've got. But we're going to highlight a few things here, and we're going to work from that. And I'm going to share with you some tactics that your organizations can employ tomorrow in order to start making strides in improving this situation and building a more sustainable workforce model. So, one of the first questions I asked, I'm going to be honest, when I started this research, I too thought maybe it was a matter of the job seekers that were doing it wrong. I thought if I could just look into this information, I could figure out what it is that they're doing wrong and I could give them tools to correct. Now, the reality is I did find some strategies that I've shared in other sessions with aspiring professionals on how they can be better adept at finding that first job. But the reality is there are issues in our industry and how we handle this. So because I was focused on job seekers, one of the first things I did was I asked those job seekers what their job search was like. I asked them, how long have you been looking for a job? Let's just understand how long do these people sit and look for jobs when they already have maybe graduated high school, graduated college, they've got degrees, some of them have certifications. Let's look at these aspiring professionals. How long does it take? And by the way, this data set comes from all over the world. I had people in many different countries. It was very dispersed. Some of them, as I said, had college degrees, some high school diplomas, some had cybersecurity certifications, and we're going to talk more about that in a few minutes. But what you can see here is that in an industry that has 4 million open jobs, these aspiring professionals who've gone to school in some cases for this will spend 3 months or longer looking for a job. Look at that. Way more than half. More than a quarter of them, it takes 7 months or longer. And you know what? I said that some have degrees, some don't. There is no correlation between degrees and other things and how long these job searches took. I even asked them, do you have a mentor? Do you have degrees? What did you do prior? There was no correlation. But what I saw was these job search lengths were evenly distributed across all those other demographics. So that's concerning. But you might look at this and you say, well, all right, Alyssa, these are people who've never worked in the industry before. I mean, it's hard to find some entry-level jobs, and that's fair. But I didn't just ask the aspiring professionals how long it took them to find a job. I asked the experienced professionals how long did it take them to find a job. And you know what? It didn't change a whole lot. Now, you do see One thing that changed is, okay, 46% of them do find a job in less than 2 months. That's good. Okay, a little less than half. But that means the other more than half, almost 54%, it takes them 3 months or longer. What's more concerning is that 23%, very close to a quarter of them, who will search for 7 months or longer to find their next job. So these are people with demonstrated experience in cybersecurity who also can't find jobs. So suddenly this narrative about there not being enough talent, this narrative about, well, they're entry level, so of course it's hard to find, that starts to fall apart because we see the problem is much bigger than that. And this is where things really started to unravel. And I started to really dig in and try to figure out, okay, there's more to this story than meets the eye. I need to find more. So I asked other questions on the survey. This one was really particularly interesting because this comes up a lot. If you follow me on Twitter, by the way, you'll see me tweeting this stuff all the time. The idea of bad job descriptions. When I asked both aspiring and experienced cybersecurity professionals what the biggest challenge was that they ran into, you can see overwhelmingly they said it was bad job descriptions, more so than salary, more so than company culture, more so than finding the right level of role or finding remote work. Simply put, the job descriptions stand in the way. So again, this is an indication that we as hiring organizations and hiring managers and recruiters are not doing this the right way, that there's something wrong in how we are searching for talent. If we can't find these individuals who want so desperately to be a part of our industry or who are already here and just want to find a new gig. So these are some very telling tales, and I started to dig in more. And I really wanted to start to develop some ideas of what it is that we're doing wrong. So I told you, I investigated hundreds of job descriptions online. I talked to hiring managers and recruiters as well. And what I found was that our job descriptions suck and our hiring expectations are completely out of whack. They make it impossible for us to maintain a sustainable workforce. And that's what we need to fix. So let's talk about what we can do as cybersecurity professionals in this industry to make this better. Let's start with job descriptions. Let's talk about these for a minute. Let me share a few examples with you. So let's start with this job description for a cybersecurity intern or an information security intern. This is an intern. Think about your definition of an intern. It's usually someone coming out of school or someone maybe still in school who's going to work for a reduced rate. They're going to come in and kind of learn some of the skills of the trade. They do maybe some lower level tasks for your organization, things that you otherwise wouldn't be able to get to, right? That's what we do with interns. But look at this job description for an intern, a bachelor's degree, a CISSP, a CISA, a CISM, or CEH. So we want them to have certs too before they get an internship. And next one's pretty funny. A minimum of 7 years working in information technology security. Excuse me, what? 7 years of experience in security for an intern. I don't know about you, but when I hire somebody with 7 years of experience, they're probably going into a senior role. So this is problematic. So the only one I found, check this one out. This one goes on for an information security architect for 3 pages. Look at it, just this intricate detail of all the responsibilities for an information security architect. Now understand, an architect is a very senior role. We expect them to have a wide breadth of skills, no doubt. But look at the laundry list here. Look at the list of requirements, all these various technologies and things that this organization, who I have for their right to have obfuscated here, just look at what they're asking for. What magical unicorn out there is going to fit a job like this? There just isn't one. This isn't realistic. But this is what job descriptions in cybersecurity look like. Now, I can hear you thinking at home at your desk, and you're like, well, Alyssa, I mean, these are a couple examples, and I know you tweet some more. No, the fact of the matter is this is the predominant pattern that we see. The majority of cybersecurity job descriptions have issues just like these. You see them asking for CISPs from, for entry-level roles. Well, you have to have 5 years of experience to get a CISSP. We see them, some of the worst ones I've seen, where they ask for, 10 years of Kubernetes experience. Anybody know how long Kubernetes has been around? Not 10 years. So things like this that are just absolutely impossible. And what does it do? It turns away those job applicants who might be a perfect fit for what you actually need if you could just write a decent job description. So I've mentioned a couple times now certifications. Let's talk about what I found when I started looking at job descriptions in relation to certifications. How many of you list an industry certification when you post a job? Well, the fact of the matter is I know it's most of you. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But it really depends on what certifications you're looking for and what your expectations are and whether or not you're providing other ways to fill that requirement, or is that the only one? So in looking at job descriptions, what I found first and foremost was that 71% of entry-level jobs listed CISSP as a requirement. In most cases, they specifically said, and the reason I take them as entry level, if they didn't specifically call it out themselves, was that they were asking for less than 3 years of experience. Well, that right there is pretty problematic when you're asking for a 5-year certification. That doesn't work. 91%, now this is really interesting, 91% of job descriptions list a requirement for a degree and a CISSP or an equivalent. Interesting. What about all those people who don't have degrees? We hear from them all the time. I have many colleagues in this industry who never graduated college and do a terrific job. They're amazingly skilled and talented. What about those people who don't have a CS or a computer a cybersecurity degree? They didn't go for engineering. They went for communications or other things. Don't they have skills to bear? But we say that we want a degree in cybersecurity or in computer science or a related field. That's kind of problematic too, isn't it? So thinking about this CISSP and the way it comes up so often, and I don't mean to pick on ISC squared, right? I like the CISSP, don't get me wrong. It's how hiring managers and hiring organizations treat it that becomes problematic. Here's the story. So you see 91% of job descriptions, right? Say CISSP or equivalent, 71% of entry level say they want it. Well, ISC Squared tells us as of October of 2020, there are 2.8 million cybersecurity professionals in the world. Okay, so those are actively working cybersecurity professionals. This is from their 2020 workforce study. But as of that same time, October 2020, only 142,000 of those professionals have a CISSP certification. That's about 5%. Do the math. 71% versus 5%, 91% versus 5%. Something doesn't work here. Certifications are not the answer. And in fact, when I look at the information from my survey, only 49%, thinking back to these degrees, holds an IT or a cybersecurity related degree. So I've got 91% of my job descriptions say you must have, but only 49% of the people coming in actually have a degree that is in one of those fields. So I think you're starting to see the problems here. You're starting to see what it is that is causing this disconnect, this talent gap. It's not a shortage, it's a gap, because we just can't bridge a connection between our hiring and those professionals and talented individuals that are out there just waiting to be a part of our organizations. So the whole point of this isn't a sustainable model. We need to look at how do we make it sustainable, because we're doing this to ourselves. If we can't find cybersecurity professionals, it's all self-inflicted wounds. So how do we get better at this? How do we progress? How do we make sure that we're able to adjust not only our job descriptions and our hiring practices, but literally our expectations and how we handle our employees to make a more sustainable model? Here's where the problems begin. When we look at the core issue, when we build job descriptions, when we build a job role, and we're gonna talk about everything that's involved in that job, we are so hyper-focused on all the various technology tools and techniques that these people must come in the door with, and we think that's how we measure a successful candidate. Now, wait a minute. I've heard some of you, I've heard you say it, and I've said it myself. Well, I could teach anybody the skills. I want them to have something else, right? And we'll talk about what some of those things are that people say they want. So if that's the case, why are we so hyper-focused on technologies? Why do we expect people to come in and be able to immediately sit down and expertly configure our SIMs or our WAFs or our cloud security environments, our CASB solutions? Why do we think that that's what we need to hire? I'll tell you why. And it came from those interviews that I did with hiring managers. For some reason, we have this prevalent belief in cybersecurity that we're going to be perfect, and that the only way to achieve perfection in our security is to bring in people who've already worked in the industry and already know things and have them fill our roles. That's what we do. We do it over and over again. The job descriptions prove it. Hiring managers' attitudes prove it over and over and over again. But that's not realistic. The fact of the matter is, looking at candidates based on what technological skills they have, what they've worked with in the past, which tools they've used, which, OSINT challenges they've done. This is great information, but it is not what is the primary measure of whether or not they're going to be successful. Think about it. What other industry do we do this in? What other industry out there on this planet do we sit there and say the only people we're going to hire are people who already have the job skills necessary to sit down and do the job tomorrow? Where do we do it? Doctors? People are responsible for human lives. We don't do it there, do we? No, they have a very structured progression of on-the-job learning through residencies and all the things that they do. Think about that. Doctors learn on the job, but we can't do that with cybersecurity professionals. What about skilled trades? Plumbers, electricians. What do? They just show up and they've got a master's certificate and they can go work anywhere they want? No. They go through apprenticeships. They learn on the job. And by the way, when they're learning on the job, they get paid to learn on the job. We don't tell plumbers and electricians and doctors, oh, go learn on your own, go figure it all out, and then come to us with that information. We don't tell them that. We give them a very structured career path that they need to follow, but we don't do that in cybersecurity. We need to move out of this approach. As hiring organizations, we need to start investing in our people again. I know this is a wildly unpopular idea, the thought of spending money to train our individuals, because we're also worried, and I think of the cartoon I've seen on this, and you probably have too, Well, what happens if we train them and then they go and get another job somewhere else? Because we know cybersecurity is a hot field. So I don't want to pay for them to go get an OSCP. I don't want to pay for them to go to this vendor training. So I'll split the cost with them, or I'll reimburse them after they successfully pass it and they've worked here for 6 months afterwards. We do all these crazy things. We put all these restrictions because we don't want to invest in our people. We don't want to bring in people who we have to invest in from the start. We think we're just going to keep hiring people who already have all the skills. It doesn't work that way. That's not sustainable for obvious reasons. If every organization in the world only hired people with experience, what would we do? Suddenly we wouldn't have people with experience anymore because they'd all retire and we'd have nothing. That's a pretty obvious issue, and it's something that we need to correct, but it's not the only issue. Here's another one that you're probably going to moan and groan when I say it. The idea of diversity. Now, I told you before that a candidate's success isn't based on their technology skills alone. In fact, I would tell you it's not even the primary contributor. If you think about it, whether it's an individual or at the industry level, think about it at a macro level. How are we successful in cybersecurity? It's our problem-solving skills that make us successful in cybersecurity, is it not? That's what we do every day. We're here to solve problems. Maybe we go looking for some of them, and then we solve them. How do we find those problems? How do we solve them? How do we get better at problem solving? The key is diversity. Now, I'm going to give you some real talk here. There's some dog whistles out there. When I start talking diversity, people say, oh yeah, well, I hire for diversity of thought. And that's a way of saying, I don't want to look at demographics of people. I'm going to hire or you hear the other one is, I want the best candidate. Well, what is your definition of the best candidate? Does the diversity of their background play into that? Because it should. Consider this example. What happens if you hire, say, 20 white male engineers and another 10 white female engineers, and you're going to build new scanners for the TSA? What happens? Well, if you know the story, it should sound familiar because it did happen. We ended up with a bunch of scanners that were unfairly indicating issues with women of color because of their hairstyles. Why didn't that get identified? Because the people working on it weren't diverse. You didn't have Black women there who would have said right away, hey, you know what? This is something that we deal with in other spaces that might be a problem here too. So when you say diversity of thought comes from diversity of backgrounds, experiences, and other things. And that diversity comes from their demographics as much as anything else. So the reality is, no, I'm not saying go out and say this job is only open for one particular race or whatever demographic you want to choose. That's not what I'm telling you. What I am telling you is understanding and being deliberate about hiring for diversity needs to be a part of your success criteria for that candidate. If you're going to say I'm going to hire the best candidate or you're hiring for diversity of thought, you need to recognize that diversity is a part of that. And you have to challenge your own biases. You have to challenge your organization's biases. Looking for people who came up in the ranks just the same way you did, you're not getting diversity of thought that way. And then let's talk about this idea of core transferable skills. And we're going to bring Justin and some other examples back in here now. When I talk about core transferable skills, I am talking about those skills that transcend any industry. Things that would apply no matter if you were working in hospitality, in cybersecurity, or in the arts. What are those skills? They're core transferable skills. Now, don't make the mistake of talking about soft skills. This idea of soft skills, first of all, I hate the term in the first place because it's used more as a pejorative. And it implies that they're soft, so they're not really the rugged foundation on which we want to build things. And that's not true. Core transferable skills are the best indicator of how someone's going to be successful in a particular role. So what do I mean when I talk about core transferable skills? I'm talking about those skill sets that somebody learns in one job, as I said before, and it transcends any industry. So while I might describe that job in a certain way based on that industry, if I bring that back and identify what's at the core of those skills that I was using in that job, now I find what's transferable to other roles. So let's talk about a couple examples. We're not talking soft skills. So let's talk about a retail employee. And why do I talk about a retail employee? Because I also hired somebody directly out of retail who had no experience in cybersecurity and has also been a wildly successful cybersecurity consultant ever since. Why did I hire this person? Well, their resume told me two things. One, they had customer service skills. And I'm sorry to all my colleagues out there in cybersecurity, but we lack that. That empathy, that ability to understand the people we're talking to and communicate with them in a way that's meaningful to them so they'll understand and be motivated to want to help us. We don't do a good job of that in cybersecurity. This is an ongoing struggle that we need to get better at. And so when I saw customer service, dealing with customers day in and day out and having to learn that, that was pretty attractive to me. The other thing that he listed on his resume that was really impressive to me was that he talked about his ability to problem solve when he was faced with issues that affected the delivery of their products and services. Specifically, he highlighted an example where he found a problem in their inventory system that was affecting their returns processing. Now think about this for a minute. So let's dial this back to core transferable skills again. That ability to be able to see the interrelationships between two disparate systems that seemingly aren't related in any way, to see how they impact each other and to be able to problem solve for that, isn't that exactly what we want to see in cybersecurity? That's a core transferable skill. That's what we need to be looking for. That's what tells us if our candidates are going to be successful. So now let's go back to our barista. Let's talk about Justin for a minute. What skills does Justin have as a barista that would make him a great cybersecurity candidate? I'm going to tell you right now, a barista like Justin, given that they have other technical aptitude and desire, they're great as a SOC analyst. They have core transferable skills that fit right into a SOC analyst role. What are they? Think about what they do every day. A barista processes multiple inputs from different sources. They then have to translate those inputs into tasks that then they're going to prioritize and organize to make sure that they can execute them in the most efficient manner possible. And then they have to focus on efficiently delivering that product to the customer. All the while, they also have to plan and execute maintenance activities. So think about this from the SOC perspective. Isn't that exactly what you want a SOC analyst to be able to do? To be able to process those multiple inputs, use a method to prioritize and execute them and do them in the most efficient way possible, and delivering to the customer with quality and still also being able to plan regular maintenance and other things. That's exactly what we want in cybersecurity professionals. Those are core transferable skills that we need to be focused on, not have they worked 10 years with Splunk. So how do we improve this? Let's go back to our job descriptions and our attitudes to our hiring. We need to be more precise in how we build our job descriptions. This is how we eliminate bias. This is how we make them more open to our professionals. We need to be precise. And when I say precise, one of the things we need to understand is how do we address the skills, the experience, and the knowledge we want them to come in with. Each of those words has a very different meaning. And so when we write them in a job description, we need to be sure that we're asking for the right one. So when I'm talking about knowledge, I'm talking about, I just simply have knowledge of it. I've read about it, I've studied it, maybe I've gone to conference talks or I've researched it myself. That's knowledge. So you might have some things in your list of preferences that, hey, you know what? We want you to have knowledge in this particular thing. Now, if you say, I want you to have knowledge in Splunk because you use Splunk, and I feel like I'm picking on them, I'm really not. Please don't take it that way. I could just be be just as easily talking about Security Onion or anyone else. Is that really what I want them to have? Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. But is that going to be effective? Or do I want them to have knowledge of maybe SIM strategies, threat intel, threat hunting? Maybe that's the core of what I actually need them to understand. I can teach them the technology, send them to training for the technology, but maybe that's where I need it. Now, when I say skills, I'm talking about taking that knowledge and putting it into action, right? Skills are those things where they have some demonstrated way of applying what they know and using it in a real world environment. And then finally, experience. Well, experience is obvious. That's when we all talk about. It's, hey, I've worked on the job and I've done this somewhere before. So we need to be precise about these when we write these in job descriptions. But let's talk about those hiring attitudes now too. Now, I asked the hiring managers for what they would tell aspiring cybersecurity professionals trying to get into the industry. And the word that came up more often than not, and I hear it every day and it drives me insane, is people saying, have passion, have passion, have passion, have passion. All this stuff about passion, be passionate. Make sure you're passionate about it and have an aptitude for it. Genuine passion for the field trumps dry experience. Really? Does it? Look at your job descriptions. How do you demonstrate passion when you're passing in a resume and it's going into an ATS, automatic applicant tracking system? An applicant tracking system can't measure passion. Get this stuff out of your head. If you want to see them demonstrate passion, tell them in your job description how. Is there a place where they can submit to you videos that they've created, tutorials that they've generated, other online content that they've authored, things that would demonstrate their mastery of the topic even though they don't have experience? This involves getting outside of just the ATS. And the problem is that ATS is the limiting factor on too many of our job searches. I told you about what happened with that barista resume I got. It scored very low on the ATS. I'm not even sure why the HR person handed it to me, because they were so convinced I wasn't going to want it. But I'm so glad they did, because I hired an amazing person. And that's what we need to do. We need to invite more of that. So we've got to get out of this mode of the applicant tracking system being the gate, because it breaks things. How do we encourage applicants to demonstrate passion? How can we think about hiring differently? This is where we need to go. So to wrap things up, how do we bridge this divide, this talent gap? From a hiring organization perspective, the onus is on us. We got to do better. We've got to do more. First of all, we need to realign our goals for on-the-job training. We have to understand that learning and training on the job is what's going to make people successful. We need to challenge our biases and deliberately seek out diversity in our candidate pool. We need to focus on core transferable skills. Those are so crucial in measuring the success of any candidate. And finally, we need to be precise in how we word our requirements and our preferences and our qualifications. And then we need to invite our candidates to be able to share those non-traditional ways that they can demonstrate their expertise. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you all being a part of this, coming and attending RSA today and being here for this talk. I hope that you can take to heart many of the lessons that I learned through this research and work with me and the rest of our colleagues to truly see that hidden link that exists between a great cup of coffee and a great cybersecurity professional. Thank you so much.